When I was about 9, I lived in this old farmhouse with my 2 parents and my 2 older brothers, me being the youngest and the only girl. My parents never believed me when I told them I saw shadows in my bedroom at night or I heard my name being called. They told me I had an overactive imagination, but I know what I saw and felt as a kid was nothing I could have made up on my own. There was one night that I remember the most of all. I would sleep in our living room or my parents' bedroom because of the things I saw and heard in my room, and when I did sleep in my room, I wouldn't last the night in there. This night, my dad had told me I needed to sleep in my own room. I was in my bed and nothing happened, so I fell asleep until I heard my name in my ear. It was a woman's voice, and at first I thought it was my mom telling me I could sleep in her bed. So I started to sit up when the blanket on my bed got ripped off of me and went across the room. I was used to hearing things and seeing things I couldn't explain, but never had anything try to be physical with me. As a little girl, I was frozen in fear. I was so scared, I thought if I just closed my eyes and didn't move, it would leave me alone. Boy, was I wrong. I was trembling so bad, and I remember trying to hold my breath so I wouldn't make a noise to upset whatever was in my room. That's when I heard a loud, high-pitched scream in my ears, and then I felt 2 hands on my shoulders push me down into the pillows. At this point, with me being held down and the high-pitched scream in my ears, I guess my fight or flight kicked in, and I started screaming and kicking. It didn't take long for my lights to turn on and my whole house to be in my bedroom, but before they came in, I felt the pressure let go of my shoulders, and then I had a burning feeling on my forehead. My mom held me as I cried and took me into her bedroom as my father took my brothers and put them back into their beds. My mother told me she never saw me scream before, and that was the moment she knew I wasn't lying to her. That, and the fact that I had a big scratch on my forehead, as if someone put their nails above one side of my face and quickly swiped the nails to the other side. To this day, I can't drive to that house without feeling like I'm being watched. I have more stories about the house, but this is the only one that sticks out to me because it was the first time I felt completely helpless. As it turns out, when I was in college years later, I made a really close friend who was a medium. She told me that I also had a gift, and that's why I was targeted as a child. Also, to point out, we had a river in our backyard, and some people believe spirits travel alongside the water. I'm happily living on my own now, but I do plan on going back sometime soon with my friends to see if she can pick up anything or any kind of energy I felt there as a kid.
I made this account specifically to share my short little experience on here. It's not typical, so let me just share it. I was about 14 years of age when this happened. I was in my bed trying to fall asleep, and was failing. My dad was in the living room trying to rock my brother to sleep. This was a normal routine, but this night wasn't normal. I finally think I'm about to fall asleep when I hear these loud knocks on my front door. It echoed throughout the whole house. It's like 3 a.m. The knocks are then followed by a girl screaming, "Help, please, my mom needs help," over and over. She was practically shrieking. My dad assumes it's some sort of a trap. They use a little girl, the dad becomes vulnerable, opens the door, easy access inside the house, and so forth. So he's yelling back at her to leave us alone through the door. This little girl starts crying, kicking our door over and over again. Her screams still ring in my head every now and then. By this point, I'm sitting upright in my bed crying as well. I'm terrified and upset with my dad because what if she really did need help? So maybe 10 minutes go by of this continuous crying and screaming when I hear a man outside my window, which is only a few inches beside my front door where the girl was, and I hear him telling the girl to shut up, and I can hear him grab her and she's screaming for him to let her go. I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to look out my window, but I was paralyzed with fear. I can tell he's dragged her into the street. Her screams for her mother became quieter the further they got. Soon I hear about 3 cars speed off down the street after a lot of men were yelling, I assume at each other. My parents called the police and tried to get me to fall asleep, but I was too scared and traumatized. To this day, which is about 3 years later, I still think about that little girl and her mother all the time, scared of what might happen to them. I used to want to know, but now I don't think I want to, as bad as that sounds.
Let me preface this by saying I never believed in the paranormal until St. Patrick's Day 2016. I live in Metro Detroit, and my house is adjacent to a county park that's incredibly dense and almost untraversable woodlands. Me and my friend were pretty hammered, and we decided to explore that night. It was unusually warm with almost no wind, and pretty unusual for that time of the year here in Michigan. We set off, and I was feeling adventurous, and I knew just where to take the crew. There was a small river that flowed through the park, and on the banks of the river near a decrepit old footbridge was a rope swing. A few years prior, a girl jumped off the rope swing and into the river, hit her head, and then died. It gave me the heebie-jeebies just being in that clearing and looking at it. Unusually enough, the rope swing was moving. Keep in mind, there was almost zero wind that night. Artificial flowers scattered over the ground in memoriam crunched under our feet. My one friend Amanda, who was normally the most fearless of the bunch, turned around and froze dead in her feet. She nudged my shoulder, and there was definitely a person right there staring at us. Not sure if it was just another hiker, but in this context it truly freaked us out, and we slowly backed out of the clearing. Just then, my phone rang. I still live at home, and at the time it was getting late, so I figured it was just my worrywart dad wondering if I was okay. It was a private number. I answered it, but there was nothing but breathing on the other line. I immediately hung up and played it off as a butt dial. As the group was already rattled by our encounter with the shadowed stranger, I dodged the "who was that" from another friend and pretended like I didn't even hear it. My phone rang again. It was another private number. I answered it, and all I heard was
10 p.m. Say goodnight.
And then I heard a click and they hung up. Amanda heard the voice and gave me a look that just indicated, "Let's get the fuck out of here." But instead she said, "Quit fucking around with us, man," and tried to laugh it off. Until her phone rang. It was another private number. She answered it and all she heard was
10 p.m.
And then there was another click and they hung up. At this point she's holding back tears and running towards the main road, and of course we all followed. It's 9:54 and we hear sticks breaking and pounding feet coming up from the embankment behind us. I'm in a full-on sprint at this point. At the front of the park, there's a car parked adjacent to a few tennis courts and a disc golf course. We see a set of headlights. It's a drunk couple arguing amongst themselves in the parking lot, and we ask them if they need help. They were fighting about who would be the one to drive home, and quite frankly they weren't in any condition to drive, at least from what I could tell. We were just relieved we had extra company and chatted them up and exchanged names and numbers. At 10 p.m. on the dot, the police arrived. Someone must have called about the disorderly couple. They immediately slammed the two to the ground, and backup doesn't follow far behind. The one officer has me and my friends lined up in a row, but what he said haunts me.
You kids really don't want to be messing around in the woods at this hour.
There's no telling what'll happen to you back in there.
I'd gotten used to checking Craigslist before buying anything new, so when my ice cream maker died, I headed there. I found the one I wanted, new in box, and emailed to see if it was still available. For some reason, I assumed I was talking to a woman, and we made plans to meet up. I'd gotten sort of careless about always meeting in public and had agreed to come to her home, believing she had several small kids that made it difficult to leave home. I was supposed to go after work, and we switched to text messages so they could text the address, and so I could let them know when I was on the way. I got home and they texted me the address. My normal routine at this point would have been to hop in the car and use the TomTom, it was 2008, to find it. But since I had booted up my PC while waiting, I decided to just use Google Maps. I typed in the address, and it showed that a registered sex offender, a violent sex offender, and a child sex offender lived there. I Googled the phone number and the same person came up. I let them know I was not coming, went to Walmart, and spent $5 more to buy it there.